Hello, and welcome back to PNN. My name is Parker Taft. This Friday we are doing something we haven't done in quite some time, I think a bit over a month, and that is a book review. I know I've only reviewed, I think, 2 or 3 books. I have to go back and check since starting this channel, but I really want to get back into the groove of it. So today I'm going to be reviewing Educated by Tara Westover. Here's the book for those of you interested in it. I actually had to read it for my college summer reading assignment for my first year seminar down at Siena College. Go Saints. And I found it quite interesting. Most of the mandatory readings I've had to do over the span of my life for school have been relatively boring or dry. I haven't felt any personal connection to the text. This is the first book in a long time that I felt a personal connection. Not since when I read Winston Churchill's biography, well, one of Winston Churchill's biographies that I've read, I think 7 at this point. Yes, I think 7. That I felt such personal connection with the reading. Like, I couldn't stop reading. I kept reading page after page after page. And it's been a while since I've read a real wonderful page-turner book that wasn't in the realistic fiction Clive Cluster. Since he's a wonderful author, and I've thoroughly enjoyed his fiction books, but it's the first non-fiction book in a while that was really a page-turner for me. It's a memoir about the author, Tara Westover's, childhood, and growing up in a family that distrusted what you would consider the modern establishment. They were very Mormon. They were a highly religious family, but they also took highly literal interpretations. They saw the world as black and white, godly and the devil. And they distrusted the government. They spent most of what Tara describes as her childhood stockpiling for the end days, or for the inevitable standoff with the federal government that would come to take the children away. As Tara stated, 4 of her siblings never received birth certificates when they were born, or visited a doctor or nurse well until they were into adulthood. The other 3 did have birth certificates and did attend school for a short period of time, but they were quickly withdrawn and focused more on homeschool education. But it was not homeschool education in the classical sense of an education like we would get in public or private school, just at home. It was more of a practical hands-on skills education, which didn't prepare them at all for the rigors of modern life. For Tara, it was making home remedies and following her mother around as her mother learned the trade of midwifing, and then taking up the skills as her mother became more expert at it. And for her brothers, it was working in the scrapyard, her father's scrapyard, or helping build barns and sheds and other facilities as part of his small construction crew. So the story starts out with Tara very young, very new to the world, very naive, and it slowly grows upon it as she expands both her experiences and her personal education. There's a lot of interpersonal family dynamics and drama, but it mainly revolves around the idea of Tara basically discovering herself by first going out into the world and gaining some modicum of freedom and self-expression away from her overbearing father, who was very set in his ways in terms of his beliefs and was very unbending unless it fit his personal agenda. And it started out with singing. Well, her singing was a gift from God, so the father allowed her to do plays and stuff like that to hopefully bring more godly people to his cause by showing the gift he was given by his daughter's beautiful singing voice. But she experienced for the first time a relative freedom and constant contact with the modern, what we consider normal world. And she was interested. And then her brother Tyler, who actually left the family to go and get an education, first at BYU and then at Purdue, convinced her to take the ACT. Now, she had relatively no formal education, so she had to study and work real hard. And after taking the ACT twice, she eventually was able to take the ACT successfully and get a score high enough to get into Brigham Young University. So she goes there, and she's suddenly shocked by the world around her, because most of it she's never experienced. Her knowledge, her classical education, we could consider, is very limited. But she's also lacking certain life skills that we would take for granted in the modern world. Scheduling doctor's appointments, filling out paperwork, which was a struggle for her, not only because she had never done it before, but because of the lack of official records. She tells a story of when she was 9, is when she got her delayed birth certificate from the Idaho state government, and the extreme difficulty her mother had in procuring a delayed birth certificate for her, because no one quite remembered when she was born, what hour she was born, and who was there to witness it. So her grandmother signed one affidavit saying one date. Her mother swore it was another date. And then the date in the family Bible and in the local church's baptismal records were completely different dates as well. So it was difficult to determine when she was actually born, which made it hard for her to establish that she was actually born and set up an official paperwork trail. So she struggles through college, and she educates herself in the classical sense and becomes both enamored in the world around her, but also feeling a sense of imposter syndrome as she's developing herself, that she's being disloyal to her family and how she doesn't fit into either world. She's become more educated and aware of the difficulties, the schisms, and the problems within her own family, but also she feels like an imposter in our world because she came from that background, and she feels like she doesn't deserve either. So it leads to an inner clash between these two ideas, which develops over time. When she goes home, she becomes the meek 16-year-old that left and toes the family line and basically is told what to think and what to believe. And then she goes out into the wider world when she leaves home for college and her further education, and she becomes someone different. And so there's this growing inner conflict, but also conflict and tension with her family. And so it culminates in a schism with her family, where she finally realizes that she has to do what's best for herself. And the whole story basically is building up to her using her voice to tell her story, and the importance of using one's voice to tell your own story. And she defines being educated as basically discovering one's self. Classical education, knowledge, we should use in this term, is important. But to be truly educated, you must understand both the world around you and yourself, and how you fit into the wider puzzle. And she made the decision to separate herself from her family for her own health and well-being. So I think it's a very good book. It certainly is a page-turner, and I remember several times where I've lost track of how much time I've spent reading it. I think it's important for everyone, because you can take many different lessons from it. There's the mental health aspect. As she said, both her brother and her father suffered from mental health issues. There's the family conflict dynamic, with her conflicts with both her mother and father and her older brother Sean. There's the abuse aspect of the story, where she received physical and emotional abuse from her older brother Sean. There's also the pull it up by your bootstraps story, where she and her brother Tyler took the initiative and bettered themselves. And then you have also the road of self-discovery, going from being told what to think, what to believe, to discovering yourself and the world around you. So it's a multifaceted book that you can derive many lessons from, especially if you're on your own personal development journey. I especially recommend it if you're just starting out. It's something both motivational and instructional. And I think it also teaches us the need to be aware, the willingness to lend a kind ear to other people's plights and problems, because everyone has their own thoughts, their own opinions, and sometimes they just want to express their voice, to express who they truly are and how they see things, and be constantly looked down upon or told that they're wrong can hurt their self-esteem and mental health, and either can lead to an explosion, leading to conflict, or it can lead to a subservience and a sort of breaking of their will and character, which isn't healthy either. So, I think that about wraps up the summary of the book. Again, I highly recommend it. It is very insightful. And, well, that's about it. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope to be doing some more of these in the near future, as I love reading and I love talking about books with you guys. And maybe expand this from just purely nonfiction and self-development books to maybe nonfiction books in general, and then maybe meaningful fiction books. But that's all for now. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and as always, this is the Peanut Broadcast, signing off.